I really am genuinely so excited to spend some time with you because Dr. Jill Grimes, what should I call you today?
Dr. Jill is great.
Dr. Jill, I'm so excited to meet you, and I'm so excited to introduce other people to you. I know there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who know you, and how do they know you so well?
Well, young people often know me as the TikTok college doc, as long as that lasts. And I've been a speaker for the American Academy of Family Physicians for many years. And so the doctor community, that's sort of my niche there.
Yeah, your videos are terrific. And for today's conversation, first of all, I always like to start off just by, I'm so grateful. And the information you share is so wonderful and helpful. And I find it's really hard for people to talk candidly nowadays. Do you find that?
Yes, yes, on so many different levels.
Yeah.
From politics to literally platforms limiting what you can say. And yes. And I'm just that, my whole life I've sort of, if anything, gotten in trouble for just being very candid.
Yeah. I've had that issue. I've had to really reel it in, and I'm pretty good at doing it. But like, I was just thinking of condoms. Just like saying condom. Someone might be like, "You're saying condom," but when I was younger, I would hear the word condom all the time. I mean, not like every day, everywhere I went. It wasn't like at the grocery store and the gas station, but just the idea of a condom. Like, do you hear people talk about condoms a lot?
Well, it depends what company I'm in. But
Right.
honestly,
Well, like even on the internet, even on TikTok, like I don't see people talking
no,
about safer sex and body.
no, but part of that I think is because, at least from my limited experience, when I do talk about those things, it gets suppressed. And so that video doesn't get out there.
Yeah, I noticed with your marijuana videos. I mean, you can't even say the word marijuana. You can't even show marijuana. I've gotten flagged for that.
Yeah, cannabis is definitely, you have to be super careful or spell it, W33D for weed. It's
Right.
crazy. It's frustrating because you've got people talking about misinformation that is wrong and harmful. And when you're trying to educate people, it is just, sometimes I just feel like I'm beating my head against a wall because of what we are not allowed to say. It is very frustrating.
I am going through the same thing. Yeah, I want to educate people, and I also want everyone to know, anyone who's listening who has values that are different than mine, or your parenting style or technique or what's important, I support you. Like, I support you. My thoughts and ideas are no more important than anyone else's. And my job is to give young people information, give anyone information,
Right.
so they can be informed and make the healthiest, best decisions for themselves. But what I find is they're so, like, it's wild when people restrict certain content, because the internet is the wild west, right? Like songs, music, videos, YouTube, like there's so much out there. And yet the people who are trying to advocate responsibly have a very hard time doing it.
Yes. And I'm not sure what the answer is other than to keep trying. And I put out a recent TikTok about talking about STDs, and I've spent 15 years of my life talking about STDs, and I like to talk about lots of other things, but
Yeah.
it is something that's important, and it just got shut down, possibly because of the word condoms, which I spelled with a 0 instead of using an O.
Right.
It still got shut down.
Are you doing, and everybody, you need to check out Dr. Jill Grimes. So Dr. Jill Grimes is the TikTok doc, and also the author of the Ultimate College Student Health Handbook. This is the most recent edition, and I'm going to recommend everybody get the College Student Handbook, every parent, every student, and I'll share this on my lists and promote it, and I'll pull some tips out of here, and I'll share them on social media, because this is such an awesome book. So, I mean, I should have led with the book, but it's like,
Hey, listen, I wish we could gift my book and your book to every single graduating
Yeah.
student.
Yeah. This book has everything, the guide from hangovers to homesickness, and it's written by a medical professional with 25 years, 30 years, how much? A lot of good years of experience. Like 30 years of experience working with young people. You also worked on a college campus providing health information, and now being on TikTok and on Instagram and social media. What I wanted to ask you, Dr. Jill, is are you doing a lot on YouTube?
I have not quite made it to YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm planning actually to be active there because I feel like that might. I don't know. I don't know that platform yet, but I feel like it might be less restricted.
I was going to say, if you want to be honest and talk candidly and say the word condom or say the word herpes or say the word fentanyl or say the word Narcan and naloxone and talk about prescription drugs and talk about all the things that are censored, it's really a wonderful platform. Like I'm going to be doing a lot more on YouTube as well. Yeah, because it's, just as talking to you, like we are so passionate about helping people. And I want the listeners to know, I've got a lot of questions for Dr. Jill we're going to talk about being blackout drunk. We're going to talk about hangover prevention. We're going to talk about marijuana. We're going to talk about some birth control. We're going to talk about, we got a lot of things to talk about. So I want this to be a very prescriptive conversation so that the takeaways can be, oh, I could do this or I should do this. But I really wanted people to become familiar with who you are and what you do and why you do it. So can you give us the summary?
Yes. So I am a family physician, and I always wanted to be a family doctor. The funny thing is, when I was in 5th grade, I made straight A's to the C in handwriting. And my teacher pulled me aside and she said, "That's okay, Jill, you can be a doctor." I'm like, yes. And I hung on to that. And my dad was a professor. So all about education in my family. I actually have a sister who is a doctor and a brother who's an engineer. And also he teaches at the college level. And so, that was that growing up. Then I'm also the Girl Scout mom. I was the, photographer for the dance team. We have 2 daughters. I love all of that stuff. And I love young people. And I've always had a special passion for adolescents and young adults, partly because I think I felt in my head so much older. And a lot of times I felt like adults didn't take me seriously when I felt like, hey, this is what I feel and I'm passionate about. So I've always tried to really be able to listen and talk with young adults and adolescents. And then ultimately I started making college first aid kits as a high school graduation gift. And the first one I made was for our babysitter, next door neighbor, dear friend. I was really proud of it. It was so cute. It had all the pops and whistles. And I took it over there, and my friend, the mom's like, "Okay, this is great, but Elise isn't going to have Dr. Jill with her." And so she runs and gets an index card out of her kitchen drawer and starts firing questions at me. When do you take Tylenol versus Advil? What do you do if it's food poisoning? How do you know what to put on a rash? And anyway, that became a 22-page laminated booklet that I started putting with my first aid kits, and eventually that became this book. So that's how I'm here.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And as a parent versus being a doctor, what were some of the big challenges, and did your kids listen to you?
So yes, but I think I had the distinct advantage that a lot of my friends are female physicians and their kids are my kids' friends. And so they grew up with the mommy docs. That was, our little friend group. That's what we call ourselves, the mommy docs. And my husband actually is also a physician, and many of them are married to physicians. And so a lot of my kids' friend group just grew up assuming most adults were doctors. And if they were talking about something medical, that there was a reason. But also, our dinner conversations at dinner table, we were big family dinner people. We had family dinner no matter what, always. And, our conversations, we'd ask the kids about their day, and they would talk about the highlights from their day, and we would talk about the highlights from our day. And so, they just got exposed to different stories, whether it was a motorcycle accident and my husband was, doing anesthesia for somebody who who maybe became an organ donor because they were in an obviously terrible fatal accident, or, so they grew up hearing those things. So I will say our kids, who of course are perfect angels with no flaws, right? Like everybody's kids. But they did honestly listen pretty much, but partly because also their friends, my other nickname is Cool Mom.
Yeah.
Not because I allowed drinking or partying, but because our girls' friends always knew that they could ask me anything, even if it was awkward. They had painful periods, if they had, whatever, they could ask me about it.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think I had an unfair advantage, but our kids listened.
That's great. When it comes to what's keeping you up late at night, when it comes to just students in general, like what are some of the things that are really that are just upsetting that you just see happening again and again and again, and other parents or students should be aware of?
100% the thing that keeps me up the most. Oh gosh, well, there's three things immediately that come to mind. But the very first thing is loneliness and anxiety and depression. The rates of suicide are terrifying. And I know that you know this, and I so admire how you address that it's just so hard, and it doesn't matter how much training you have, whether you're a psychiatrist or a parent or whoever. It's hard to hear those things. It's hard to talk about them. And I just think it's just so magnified right now. There's just so much loneliness, and there's like everyone talks about this, but I genuinely believe that the internet, the whole fear of missing out, and just, it looks like everyone else is having so much fun, and you're, and the only truth is your truth, but you think you're seeing the other people's truth, but it's not. So that's the number one thing that keeps me awake. The second thing is just kind of mixing it all together, the culture of blackout drinking, weed. There's a sense that it's a social norm, and because in some groups it is. And if I go stand in front of, and I'm not trying to pick on Greeks, and I know your experience from hearing your videos, but if I stand in front of a group of frat pledges their freshman year, and I say 30% of college students choose not to drink, they literally think I'm stupid, because closer to 100% of their peers do drink, and a lot of them drink to excess.
Right.
And so you have to know your audience. But it's just scary to me because they don't believe how dangerous it is until there's a tragedy. And whether that's taking a pill that you haven't slept in 3 nights because you're so panicked about your organic chemistry test, and your friend gives you a Xanax to help you sleep, and that can have fentanyl in it. I mean, these things just terrify me, because I think, in general, it's always been true that young people feel like they're going to live forever. They don't have that same sense of mortality appropriately as older people do, but they're not getting the real risks of many of the things that they're doing. And that's why I'm out here talking and talking about these medical risks.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think there's a way to do it. It's just it's really interesting, because when you talk about cannabis and when you talk about fentanyl, and I got lucky because I did a post on fentanyl. Dr. Scott Hanlon, I talked to him, and he's been a real advocate of education when it comes to fentanyl and Narcan and naloxone, and I was able to share that. But so much of the stuff is censored, and it's interesting because the people who need it most can't always get it. So I'm going to keep doing it, and I know that you're going to keep doing it, and I know that for so many parents it's so frightening. The solutions, though, I take notes when I have my conversations, and the loneliness piece. I'm going to be doing a lot on loneliness this year. I think but here's the thing about loneliness. It is normal to feel lonely.
Right.
Like, I don't know, as an adult, if you've, in the past 3 to 4 years, or even in the past year, I'm just curious, have you felt lonely? Like, do you feel lonely even though you have a full life?
Yes, yes, not honestly, not often, but I I feel lonely in sometimes within my work or what I do, and
Yeah.
so yeah, that 100% all the time because if
Right.
people wonder how I can possibly take up that much time, and so yeah, I do.
Yeah. I feel lonely
To talk
too.
to you.
Well, it's fun to talk to someone who's doing something similar, who's mission oriented, because I mean, I do feel lonely, less lonely lately, but I've been doing this for like 25 years, and I've been really like seeing that there's a problem. We know there's a problem. Year after year, we see the problem. And for parents and students who are in high school, I can tell you, and Dr. Jill can tell you, that we know more than half of you are going to struggle with your mental health, most likely, right? Like that is like statistically, we know that so many of you are going to struggle in the classroom. We know that's going to be challenging to make friends. We know you'll feel homesick up to 70%, even more, a higher number of students. So there's all these things that are normal, and there's so many people who don't want to hear it, which is also being a doctor. Like, tell me about this. How frustrating is when you know that there are going to be certain problems, but people don't know they're a problem till they're a problem. Like, how you get it?
Yes, yes, it is incredibly frustrating. And one of the things that I end almost every talk with when I'm talking to especially graduating seniors or their parents is I talk about how we say, how many times do we say or hear, college is the best years of your life, right? No pressure. College is the best years of your life. And you know that and you hear that over and over. And so when you go and you start having a bad day, not only are you not achieving this thing of, wow, this is the best days of my life, and it's horrible. How sad is that? But then you feel like you're letting down your parents, you're letting down yourself. And like, we're actually adding to that. So, first of all, I certainly hope no one peaks at 22. I don't want college to be the best years of anyone's life. I want the best years of their life so far, but my goodness, I certainly don't want that to be the best years. But I think we really need to talk about this and to talk about and some loneliness is okay. It sometimes you need that to push you to get out to do stuff. And I love how you give very specific tips about doing volunteer work and how that makes you feel and joining clubs. And I'm a huge proponent of that. I wish we could get started on every college campus, something like a Friday night spontaneity club, so that, like at 8 p.m. on Fridays, you meet in front of the student union and just whoever shows up and you go bowling or you do this or you do that. And, so that where you don't have to have other plans so that people could
Right.
have a need to do that.
Right.
Anyway.
I think that'd be amazing. Like, being social is required. Being social is part of the requirements in living in a particular place or being a student. Because I think this idea of being invited somewhere, it's so scary. I had a lot of anxiety in high school about being invited to do things. Thursday I would get very anxious because if I didn't have anyone to be with,
Right.
and my one friend who I would do things with was busy, that I would be alone. I spent a lot of time eating. Like, I would seriously create this like big nacho night where I'd have like almost an entire bag of Doritos. Like, it was unhealthy. And I'd have like this cheese sauce and my jalapenos, and then I would have like M&Ms. And I was very overweight during my early years in high school because I was in so much pain because I
Yeah.
was so lonely. And I have learned how to be lonely and to be happy. And the thing is, loneliness does not equal unhappiness, and loneliness doesn't equal having a terrible time. And loneliness is temporary. And I think that you said it's actually a positive thing because it activates us to want to do something. But if we're activated and we can't do something because we're too anxious or we don't have the skills, then it's finding someone who can help. And
Right. Right. Exactly. And it's always a fine line. I have one daughter who's an introvert. Actually, I'm just going to have a mom moment. She's the illustrator of my book.
love it.
She has a degree in animation, and she had illustrated for her university's press before she ever did for me. But but she she's a typical animator. Like, she could be by herself, even when she was little. We used to joke and we would say, Nicole's talking to the fingers, because she whole stories going on in her head, and there's a difference between being alone and being lonely, obviously. And but
what's the difference? Explain the difference for people.
Being alone just means you are physically by yourself. Lonely means that you're sad or anxious about being by yourself, or you feel like you're missing something.
Yeah.
And it's that, and it's a really tough thing to overcome, especially for somebody who's introverted or who is reads social cues a little bit differently. These things are they're so hard. And I think that's what I'm saying. I wish we could create some social norms that would allow people to always have a place where they possibly could feel comfortable going. I know even if you had that club, that people, a lot of people still would say, "Oh, I don't want to go."
But they wouldn't go. But I try to counter that. And I think what I'm hoping is people will take away is, if you have a kid who's feeling this, or if you're feeling this, is where can you find a place where you are accepted and included simply because you exist? And that's really going to be what I'm hammering for this class of 2024. Really, anyone, people who are graduating from college, people who deal with loss, people who are no longer married, people who deal with these unexpected challenges where they're alone. How do they find those places? And I think that's really that's the life skill. And that's the part where I love teaching that and hammering that is, if you feel lonely, where is it that you can go where someone's going to say, "Dr. Jill, Harlan, it's so great to see you." And then the class that I wish that everybody could be in, the class becomes, well, you volunteer, you get a part-time job. Like, part-time jobs are so social in college.
Yes, I'm a big advocate of that. And for our listeners who are thinking, "Oh, my kid's not going to have time for that," part-time jobs, most universities, they limit it to 6 hours per week. So we're not talking about a 20-hour part-time job. We're talking about frequently sitting at a desk,
right,
at a front, in the entrance of a dorm or a building, and you actually can do homework in addition to stuff. Both of our girls had part-time jobs. One of our daughters actually worked for the police department in the Lost and Found at Notre Dame. It's very busy after game weekends. But, she commented, she's like, she wasn't used to using a regular telephone, but part of her job was answering the phone and learning those phone skills that our generation took for granted. And a lot of young people, I don't know how much you have heard of this, but I hear this all the time. They are so uncomfortable picking up a phone, even a cell phone. It's not a matter of the type of phone, but like, if they have to order a pizza by talking to somebody, there's my old school talking,
right?
Talking. They're not going to do it. If they can order it online, they're going to order it online. Right. And so I think those part-time jobs, I always recommend them. I think it's a great idea. And you have to be somewhere. You have to leave your dorm room.
Yeah, I love that. I was at a school the other day, and there was a student who was working at the counseling center. And this student was a peer mentor, was a first-year student. And it was a place where she had access to the counselors, to the mental health resources. She was also part of it. And I'm a big fan. If there's something that is part of your life where you have a need or you have a vulnerability, if you need money, work in the financial aid office. If you need food.
That's a great slant.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Because you have an interest and a need, right? Yeah. Then you're around the people. Because I'm a big fan, and this is the formula of people, places, patience. It's like, when you're lonely, when you're uncomfortable, when someone wants you to drink and you don't want to drink, or someone gives you a pill and you don't want to take the pill. If you say no, well, who do you have and where do you go? And it gives you options. And then having a job, working in the health center, working around people who are experts. Well, who becomes your mentors?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, we have, in medicine and having worked literally in a university health center, obviously pre-med students go there. My dad was a business professor. They always had students volunteering in the business school. And, you're right. But I don't know why I never connected that like with financial aid. I just think that's so smart. That what your need is beyond your major, but whether it's you want to be around, counselors. I think that's excellent advice.
Yeah. I love those little hacks because I think that there are so many ways for people to be able to make strong choices, but I think they're set up to struggle. And we have so many loving parents who listen, and all we want to do is help our kids to be successful. But if your kid doesn't, and this is another thing, and this all ties into being a doctor, the people you're treating for a lot of mental health issues, I would say it's probably correlated to anxiety related to rejection, social anxiety, change, transition. The students who are self-medicating, what are they trying to numb? Those things. So I think collectively, we have the answers in terms of the prescriptive recommendations, but I think the underlying theme of us being partners with parents, partners with students, that really excites me.
It is exciting. I think there's unlimited potential, and I love that you are directly exploring this. And and again, to me, the biggest things I love about your videos is that you are giving concrete steps, and you're not saying, oh, it's in your head. You're saying you're feeling sad, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling peer pressured, you're feeling this or that. And okay, that's reality. And what's next? And you're doing that, of course I revert to Disney, the next right thing. But
and you're there to offer support without judgment.
Yes, that's the goal. I have been talking about awkward subjects for so long, and I'm not here and never have been to say X, Y, or Z is wrong, whether it's sex or the other thing. I want young people to be able to hear what I'm saying. And my peers have always been surprised how often I can engage students in real conversations, for example, about cannabis. And when, and it's because I don't start with, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing that, or shame on you, or, it's just, hey, so how long have you been using gummies every night to, if they're having insomnia and they're there for that, well, what all have you tried? Have you tried this? And then, and if you, have you tried gummies? If that's if you ask it, that, or how many of your peers are using that, firstly, people are much more likely to engage in the conversation.
Yes. Well, let's talk about marijuana, cannabis. I live in Illinois. It's legal if you're 21. It's intense. The potency. I know that's all changed. When a student is getting high, is using, what's the real harm? Because I think that it's been so normalized, and I mean, what's the real risk, Dr. Jill?
You got about 20 hours for me to answer that? No, I'm just kidding. So for the parents, I just want to say today's weed, which is how most young adults refer to it, to cannabis. Marijuana is no longer politically correct to say that. That was a derogatory term.
Well, you can't say marijuana?
What? Because it was referring, it was a Spanish term referring to immigrants. Anyway.
I've said it a bunch of times, but I'm always learning. And for anybody I offended, I'm sorry. It's so easy. I didn't mean to.
Well, I mean, yeah, honestly, I think in the first edition of my book, I'm sure I said marijuana because I thought that was the more correct term, but cannabis is the
Okay.
correct term. But anyway, but what I want to say to the parents is today's weed is not your pot. So back in the day, most parents, I'm talking to the general, I realize I may be older than other parents, but I'm talking to the general crowd that remembers Cheech and Chong and associates marijuana, weed, cannabis, whatever you pot, with kind of casual relaxation and feel good stuff. Back then, the THC concentration, that's the THC is the active part that causes the high or the buzz or the hallucinations. Back then, the concentration was very small, less than 5%. Now, routinely in the United States, it's 15%, and it can get up to 30%. And then there's concentrated forms called dabs and oil and shatter. These things get up to 99% THC. It's a really, really, it's not even the same product. And the issue is that so in the 70s or 80s, cannabis was not addictive. It would not be qualified as addictive as an addictive substance because there was no withdrawal syndrome. Now, with these concentrated forms, there is indeed a withdrawal syndrome. Unfortunately, the withdrawal syndrome is irritability, anxiety, all the things that people started using it for the first place, in the first place, and so it creates this vicious cycle. But it can be addictive. It's not addictive for everybody. It's about 1 in 6 young people, though, that will get addicted. So you go, okay, well, 5 out of 6 people can use it casually, but if you're the 1 out of 6 and you don't know ahead of time, that's not good because you get addicted very, very quickly. The other thing is that if you have a genetic predisposition for psychosis in your family, so you have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder with psychosis in your family, you have a genetic predisposition to develop that yourself. And what we worry about and what we're seeing, and it's still being actively defined, but there's without a doubt an association of using this concentrated THC and having a psychotic episode that then kind of figuratively flips that switch on, and then you develop full-blown psychosis disorder earlier than you would have. So maybe you would have developed schizophrenia at 30 if you hadn't smoked weed earlier, but because you did, you had a psychotic episode. And so that's very scary to me. And the other thing is because it is becoming so prevalent, and I'm in Texas, it is not legal in Texas. I can assure you it's everywhere here. You can say it's not legal and it's not, but that's not limiting anybody's access to it. Right. Which also means that you have more illegal different cannabis products here where there's not even any quality control.
Right.
So, which is a whole separate thing. And people get, weed that's laced with other things like LSD, acid, scary things. So anyway, but what I wanted to say is that it's becoming so commonplace in some circles, not in all, that they are self-medicating with that, just like we're self-medicating with alcohol. And if you're self-medicating with anything, whether it's nicotine, alcohol, cannabis, you're not learning the coping skills that are healthy. And this is a developmental time in your life in college, those college years as a young adult, where you need to be learning better and more healthy coping skills. Like you were talking about eating when you're frustrated and sad and lonely, and that's so common. And so okay, I think that's run off a long time, but those are some reasons that I'm concerned about. Right. It. And it's not, to me, it's not no big deal. I get very frustrated at that. And every time I give a talk, it's amazing how many parents will come up to me afterwards and say, okay, I thought I might have been the only one here tonight, but my kid did this and ended up in the ER and or in a psych unit for a week. I definitely don't go more than 10 days without a panicked text or message from a friend of a friend or a Facebook friend through my physician communities or whatever, without somebody reaching out to me about this happening to their kids. So yes, I see a skewed population because, I'm going to see the people having problems and I'm going to hear about it. But let me tell you, they're serious and they're not it's not easy to get past that when that happens.
So let's say somebody saying, okay, Dr. Jill, great. I still like my gummies. I still am going to whatever, vape or smoke or whatever I want to do with weed. How do I know if I'm just high or having a psychosis? What's the difference? How does someone know?
Well, a true psychotic episode is scary. And it is what we see most commonly with cannabis is, I mean, people are terrified. The hallucinations are very commonly like FBI is after you. People are shooting you. When you see cars, if you look at the studies in Colorado, which was one of the first places to legalize it, they started seeing more and more speeding accidents, and it's people who are driving like a bat out of hell because they think they're being chased by someone who is trying to kill them with machine guns, which is completely a hallucination, obviously. So, it's a full-on psychotic episode is very traumatic, and you wouldn't. Your friends would be the ones taking you to get help. You would just be terrified. Right. Or you also can get just straight up toxicity where you're vomiting nonstop. I mean, you can get physical, primarily vomiting or passing out or whatever. I mean, but the psychosis is hearing very scary voices or seeing or visualizing scary things. It's not something pleasant.
Yeah. Thanks for differentiating that, because I think people don't understand and don't know, because again, it's so hard to get good information. What about the student who has a lot of anxiety, who perhaps has ADHD, has something that's an underlying diagnosed issue, and they're being treated with any sort of medication, but they're self-treating and they're treating at a very low dose, and they're saying, Mom, Dad, this really helps me. Cannabis, it's so funny. I got to change I'm always happy to change, but cannabis is used to treat a lot of medical issues. So under the care of a doctor, why can't we get this under the care of a doctor? And is there a healthy way to use it to relieve any of these symptoms?
You could ask 10 different doctors and probably get at least a few different answers. Let me answer it this way. One, again, it's not legal everywhere, so it's not an option in my state.
Right.
Two, I will tell you that every college psychiatrist that I know, and I know a bunch across the country, they all hate that substance because it really long-term makes anxiety worse. I mean, there's no question that alcohol and cannabis, I mean, it's why people use it. When short-term, it makes you feel more relaxed. But let's take alcohol, for example, here. We know that alcohol makes you feel relaxed and sleepy, but, in a small amount. But we also know it actually screws up your quality of sleep. And so ultimately, you end up with not good rest, and it makes things like depression and anxiety worse. Same kind of thing with cannabis. I'm not saying that in the short term it doesn't calm somebody's social anxiety. It does. I mean, so does Xanax. So do a lot of things, but they are long term not really a good idea. Do I think 10 years from now might there be some derivative? There might be something with higher CBD and less THC that might be helpful? Oh, sure. I think it might, but we don't have enough studies. We have it's part of the problem. We haven't been able to study it because it hasn't legal, and medical marijuana is a different different concentrations and all these different things. And so I try really hard to be evidence based, and at this point there's not evidence basis for that. But I do think in the future that's an option. I don't think people are lying when they say it helps, but I also don't think the positives outweigh the negatives.
Right. And for the parents who were in college 20, 30 years ago and used cannabis It's, well, what you were using 20 or 30 years ago is very different,
Yeah, it's not out. That doesn't exist anymore.
right? It's totally different. So if you're somebody who's like, oh, you know, people are overreacting, understanding the differences. And I think it's really important. And I'm not pushing back because I'm advocating one side or another. What I'm doing is having a conversation that I have with college students
Right.
who want to find the way that it's okay, and using the arguments that it's used for people who have medical issues, and a low dose that can relax someone just like a glass of wine. Why would a 2 milligram gummy be different than someone having an adult having a glass of wine at the end of the night?
Right. Well, and here's the thing: a gummy is typically 10 milligrams. So if you were going to do a 2 milligram dose, that would be biting the head off the gummy, which nobody does. And side note, parents, just two quick things for parents here. One, edibles like gummies do not kick in quickly. They can take, typically they take close to an hour, and it could be up to 90 minutes. So the biggest mistake people make is to have one, think, 15, 20 minutes later, well, I'm not feeling anything, I might as well have another. Then they have a whole nother gummy. And now what's going to happen is at an hour and a half, you're going to be miserably sick, nauseous, and headache, and all the bad things. So one, I want to say that. And the other thing is that parents need to know is that it transiently raises your blood pressure and your pulse. So if you have any cardiovascular issues, and say you're going to Colorado for spring break with your family, maybe don't try the gummies.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I think that people probably will have more questions. Maybe we'll do a Q&A of like a party Q&A. That'd be a really cool thing if we did
Oh,
that.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, like we did like a late night. We could do like a live, and people could ask all their questions that they can't usually ask, because it's
I don't claim to have all the answers. And again, I see the bad outcomes, but I think the most important thing is to understand today's weed versus yesterday's, like in the 80s or even 70s, pot is kind of like beer to Everclear. Like a little bit of beer is probably not going to cause a lot of harm. The same quantity of Everclear, that would be really bad for you, right?
right.
And the same thing with the THC concentrations in cannabis.
How about vaping? Because I know a lot of students will vape, and they just don't really think that it's that harmful. What are your thoughts on vaping?
Also not a fan. Vaping, and even if it's just nicotine, and we should just quickly touch on do you know about the nicotine pouches, Zyn? It's the latest thing, parents. Now nicotine, it's like smokeless, how smokeless tobacco used to be. It's nicotine without the tobacco. It comes in a little pouch that you put in between your gums and your teeth. And it's just a more quick delivery of nicotine. And that is also bad because it's very rapidly addictive. And the vaping typically comes with some nicotine. It can just be THC. It is bad for your lungs. I mean, the bottom line is inhaling anything other than oxygen into your lungs is bad for your lungs. We know that. And it's not good.
Yeah. What about blackout drunk? Let's talk about that, because I did a video. One of my more successful videos a while ago was, if you drink so much that you pass out and you wake up and you continue to drink more, you probably have a drinking problem. And and people were like, no. Oh, I'm like, then another one was, oh, I said, if you drink so much that you throw up and then you drink more, you probably have a drinking problem. And I got so much pushback. And then there were so many, it was very glamorized, and it's boot and rally. There are all these expressions of what that is. So
all right, let's talk.
I wanted to get your thoughts. Yeah, that was, and I might do another one of those. Sometimes they just get people all excited, but it's like, it's so dumb, because they're like, this is college. It's not alcoholism if you're in college.
Yeah. And they also think they're going to be able to turn off that switch and not use that as a coping mechanism when they graduate from college. And guess what? When you've been doing binge drinking every weekend for 4 years and you go into the pressure of your new finance job, you still do it. And it's really not good. And I'm really worried about everyone's livers in about 10 years because the degree of binge drinking is much higher. And again, it's a kind of a quantity thing. And I don't mean to sound like some old fogey back in the day, but it's hard to get. So first of all, let's talk about blackout versus passed out.
Yeah.
Passed out is unconscious. So if you cannot wake someone up, they are unconscious. That is dangerous. They can die. That you need to call EMS. And I know everyone's going to say that, I know that people will know others who survive that. And yeah, most will survive, but the ones that don't. And, that is straight up dangerous. And as a 20-something-year-old non-medical person, it is not your job to decide whether or not they're going to be okay. So you don't want them vomiting from having alcohol toxicity, choking on it, and dying. So there's that. That's passed out, unconscious. Blacked out doesn't mean passed out. Blacked out means that your blood alcohol level went up so fast, so high, that it turned off your hippocampus, which is what's in charge of taking a short-term memory and making it a long-term memory. So you stop making long-term memories. So you might be talking, you might not even have slurred speech. We frequently see this with shots, most frequently see this with shots, because that's how do you think, that's how your blood alcohol level shoots up quickly and too high, big quantity of alcohol in a short amount of time. And so that person may not look even particularly drunk, but the next day they have no memories for some gap. That's the blackout.
So they'll be walking around, talking, doing things as if they're present in the moment,
right?
But that part of their brain is not recording what's going on.
Nope. It's a short-term memory that never becomes a long-term memory. And so the next day, it doesn't matter if they watch a video of themselves. I mean, they might remember the video, but that video is not going to jar their memory to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, then I went in the next room and blah, blah, blah. So guys, this is important on so many levels, not the least of which is consent, because people are often physically intimate when they are under the influence of alcohol. And you do not know, you can't judge from looking at somebody else. Oh, hey, Harlan, I know you are going to be, you're now blackout drunk. You're not going to remember this conversation tomorrow. You can't tell that. You cannot tell that for anyone else. And you can't even tell it for yourself. It's a matter of the next day. There's no memory there. And so the problem is you can be with somebody, intimate with them, who is giving enthusiastic, ongoing, verbalized consent, which is what we consider the standard for consent. But the next day, they truly have a blackout memory gap and they have no memory of that consent. And then you get into a whole, he said, she said, she said, she said, he said, however, right. Whatever you want to put in there, but it's one person's word against the other. And the reality is that person, if someone has no memory, they have no memory. And so that's, the lawyer's rule. I'll tell you, do not be intimate with somebody who's drinking. And I can already hear the answers everybody's had. Well, that's when everybody's intimate. But you need to know we live in a legal society, and obviously morally we want people to actually be consenting if we're intimate. So this is not a moral judgment thing. It's just a, human.
Right. I've never heard it put this way, where if you drink a lot real quickly, and I've heard the consent, I know what consent is. I'm talking about if you consume alcohol at a fast rate, you could be blackout drunk, where you're having fun, boisterous conversation, seeming like you are in the moment and present, but yet you are in a state of being blackout drunk and you don't remember. So how does that impact? So you don't know if I'm talking to someone, I don't know if they're going to remember tomorrow or not.
Nope.
Okay. So I don't know. But then is there any way to know if somebody is blackout drunk or just drunk?
Nope. There's really not. I mean, now the truth is that person, I don't want to leave everybody with the impression that they're never going to look drunk or act drunk, but because that, that alcohol will catch up with them. And, if they've had enough to be the next day, which is the only time you can say that they were blackout drunk, because then that blackout memory gap, right? If they've had enough for that, they are likely going to feel bad, and they will have had alcohol toxicity. It's very tricky, and part of the issue that is a real problem is that with our ADHD medications, prescribed or borrowed and used without a prescription, that those are stimulants, right? And when you're on a stimulant, and so nicotine and caffeine could fall into that category. Cocaine definitely falls into that category, and any methamphetamines, which includes, our ADHD meds. You don't feel the buzz of alcohol initially. So that you got the stimulation going on to your brain, which is how some people, they have 3, 4, 5 shots and they don't feel it initially, and they are alert and talking, but their blood alcohol level is still rising. And so, so that's a very common setup to be blackout drunk the next day.
Right. So if you're on this medication and you drink, then you are more susceptible to, there's the blackout drunk possibility. What are some of the other risks for students who are on any of these meds and also drink or consume cannabis?
I mean, so straight up alcohol toxicity, meaning, alcohol poisoning, whatever you want to call it. And I try and explain it that you start losing reflexes, like your gag reflex, at the same time that you're irritating your stomach lining, you're irritating your liver, you're getting nauseous. And so that's the whole, if you get toxic enough that you throw up, but you don't have that gag reflex to keep it from going in your lungs, that's how many people, die. Also, if you're suppressing that gag reflex additionally with any narcotics, like, codeine, hydrocodone, which honestly are less of an issue now that there's such a moratorium on prescribing them, with good reason. But that's another risk. Seizures is the other really risky thing that happens. So, the antidepressants lower your seizure threshold, and alcohol lowers your seizure threshold, and a lot of different illicit drugs lower your seizure threshold. And you combine these things, and you're at a greater risk for having a seizure. And a seizure in and of itself isn't, in a seizure, you can fall down. I mean, obviously you're instantly unconscious, so you can fall down and, crack your head on something. You can have physical trauma from the act of passing out and having that seizure. Yeah. And much less frequently, you can have a seizure that is a prolonged seizure that you can actually, die from this seizure that won't stop. But part of the thing that a lot of times young adults don't think about with seizures is that even if it is a provoked seizure, like in this case, say you're on 2 or 3 different antidepressants, and then you take a cough syrup that has dextromethorphan in it. That's one of the things that can lower your threshold. And you do something else, and then you have the seizure. Even if the doctors know that that's probably what caused your seizure, in a young adult, that's also when seizures can start. And so typically you're not allowed to drive for, it depends on your state, but let's just say for 6 months. And that can really put a big impact on your life, whether how you get to work, how you get to school, et cetera.
Is it obvious when someone's having a seizure? Could there be seizures that don't really appear to be seizures, smaller ones, as opposed to it being very obvious?
Yes, there can, but I would say my experience in the college setting, and again, I don't know, maybe we're missing a bunch of them, but I would say more of them are fairly obvious.
Right. Right. Okay.
And if they're witnessed, in fairness, you've got somebody left alone by themselves. The scariest thing as a parent is to think that if your kid were to be intoxicated with alcohol or whatever and left alone, but they could have a seizure and not know.
That's frightening. Okay. Some rules. If somebody is going to drink or do something they know is potentially harmful and dangerous, can you give a student some rules to try and be as safe as possible?
Yes. So let's start with being aware of, if you're on ADHD medications in particular, be aware that that is going to blunt your initial response to alcohol. So really try and space out your drinks. Honestly, my general advice is to not do shots. And I know that that depends on the culture, but the purpose of shots is to get drunk. And especially if you're on other medications, you're playing with fire. So my general advice is, if you choose to drink, drink beer, drink wine, drink, something with more volume and lower concentration of alcohol. But also try and have something in your stomach so that the alcohol is not absorbed as quickly. And being really well hydrated, which, water, but also electrolyte powders, like Pedialyte is the medical one. But that being fully hydrated, if you're dehydrated, you are going to feel the effects of alcohol and other things more quickly. And never be alone. The single most important thing is don't be alone and don't take pills. You never know what's in a pill. And it's always a bad idea to combine pills and alcohol.
Yeah. And even the idea, I was curious because I thought if someone's on any type of medication like ADHD meds or any other medication that dealing with, well, you don't really know how it's going to interact. As a general rule, to not drink if you're on any of those meds. Is that, is it, I know it's a rule, but is it not realistic? And is that why you said, just have more of lower concentrated alcohol?
The best advice is to not drink if you're on an antidepressant. I tell people it's kind of like, if your arm is sore and you're just pounding your arm all the time, I can put a Band-Aid on there, but as long as you keep pounding it, it's still going to hurt. And when you have depression or anxiety and you're on an antidepressant, you don't want to take other depressants. Alcohol is a depressant.
Right.
And so the best idea is not to. That being said, because of peer pressure and social everything and all kinds of reasons, a fair number of people do choose to drink. And, if they're going to choose to drink, I would like them to not do shots, and I would like them to limit it to one or two. It's all a risk-benefit ratio.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of people who don't drink. I know that statistically there are so many who haven't had any drinks in the last month or in the last year. Over I just did some updates on my book, and it's, I know like a third haven't had any alcohol, or even more than that, half.
Yeah.
Not.
It's more than people realize. And I think we need to normalize that. And also, have you heard the term California sober?
What's that term? I don't know the term. I should know the term.
So that is no alcohol, but yes, cannabis.
Right.
But there's also a lot of people who are just choosing to not drink or use other substances. And that's great. That's certainly a healthy choice.
Ton of people. I think it's important to mention that. But I think for the sake of our conversation, I am really wanting to help people to understand what are the risks, and if you're going to engage, because some people just aren't going to listen to you, and they're not going to listen to me, and they're going to be dumb. They're going to do things because of friends or pressure. How can you be smart about being stupid? How can you be safe without accidentally dying? Right. It's like, those are the things, because it's this idea of like, prevention versus abstinence. And it's like, I can't control what people do, and I know what they're going to do, and we know statistically what they're going to do. So how can you do it safely? And how can parents who are communicating with their kids be able to have answers? Because a lot of them don't. Okay. I'm going to keep you just for a little bit more. I have so many more questions, but I want to just hit on, well, let me ask you, because I wanted to touch on, here's some of the things, and we've talked a lot, and we can talk more, but I want to make sure that I hit the things that I had. I went through your videos, and you had some great videos. I love, and for anyone who's listening, we're going to include the videos in all the show notes. Okay. So Dr. Jill, author of the Ultimate Student Health Handbook, make sure you check this out as well. So we'll include a link to the handbook, and then also the video about being blackout drunk. We talked about that. That was great. I have hangover prevention, and then why you should never use a straw. I thought that was fascinating.
Yes. So if you have a hangover, so this is not prevention. This is you have a hangover. So a hangover is the morning after, right? The alcohol, your blood alcohol level hopefully is at zero when you're having a hangover. And symptoms of a hangover include, well, everyone knows the headache, right? Nausea is another big one because you've irritated that stomach lining. If we want you to rehydrate, that's the most important thing to help with the headache and everything, and with an electrolyte solution. And if you use a straw, you're basically, and this is true if you're vomiting for other reasons as well, but you don't want to use a straw because you're introducing air into your stomach, which then basically just makes you more likely to throw up. So that's a little trick. Don't use a straw. And when you're hungover, your blood sugar is low. So you want to be, and that low blood sugar can make you feel headachy, nauseous, shaky, half of the things, right? Mm-hmm. So you do want to get some sugar in there. When you can tolerate your electrolyte drink, then you can progress maybe to crackers or whatever. But you're really trying to get a volume of fluid in. So the next thing after crackers, that chicken noodle soup, the mom's old recipe, very salty, helps you hang on to the fluid that is there. And we know too that there's a big inflammatory response in the brain and everywhere actually associated with the whole hangover symptoms. And again, hydration is the number one thing. And of course, prevention really, I guess, is the number one thing. But at the point that you have a hangover, it's too late for prevention.
Perfect. And then birth control. I thought that was another great tip.
Yes. So birth control pills, so oral contraceptive pills, my single most important tip is to take it at the exact same time every single day, like set an alarm. Because what we see is, we're in spring break season right now, and you see people traveling and forgetting pills and changing time zones, everything else. If you are not taking your pill at the same time every day, you're more likely to forget one. And even just, it depends what pill you're on. Some of the lower dose pills are more sensitive, that if you are several hours late, they're going to lose some effectiveness. And what I really want people to hear is not only to take the pill at the same time every day, but don't rely on one form of birth control if you are trying not to get pregnant and you are choosing to be sexually intimate. You really need young, I've said this for 30 years, but young girls are fertile. And you really need to use two methods, preferably a barrier, like our word condoms, along with an oral contraceptive or a different form of contraception.
Wonderful. Okay, great information. And then there was one last piece I wanted to ask you. You know what I want to ask you? Fentanyl. What are your thoughts on fentanyl?
I think my main thought is that it's terrifying. The vast majority, something like 80%, something in that range of illegal prescription drugs sold today in the United States have fentanyl in them. And a large percentage of those I don't know the exact number, have enough fentanyl to kill you. And of course, it depends how used you are to taking it as to what dose it would take to be lethal. But what I really, really want young people to know is that you just have to, you have to assume any prescription pill that you are offered by anybody other than your pharmacist, it can have fentanyl in it, and it kills. This one pill can kill is real. I mean, certainly we've had deaths in our community. I don't know any community across the country that hasn't been affected by it. And, you know, and people have this picture of drug addicts on the street, you know, as being, and drug dealers being these scary men in trench coats, you know, and card, you know, whatever. And whatever you're picturing, it's not. The people who are dealing drugs on college campuses are other college students. They look just like your kid.
Right.
And it doesn't look scary.
And parents need to have these conversations, right?
Yes. And now that we have Narcan over the counter, you know, it is, and you can't hurt anybody. If you use it, it's just a spray that you squirt in someone's nose. If you use it and they are not passed out from fentanyl, you're not going to do any harm. And if they are passed out from fentanyl, you could be saving their life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important for students to have in their room, have in their backpack. And, you know, for parents who are like, oh, well, I don't want to promote that type of behavior. It's like, okay, well, first of all, it's not for your kid. Let's just say it's for their friend. Okay. Yeah. And if for any reason your child makes a choice that isn't the choice that you'd want them to make, and their friend knows they have it in their bag or in their room, that's so important. So I want to make sure I'm going to keep advocating that. Is there anything else you wanted to include before we wrap things up?
Yes, because this is fresh on my mind right now. I want to say that test anxiety is something that many people do not experience until college. And it is often the strongest students at the, you know, the most elite universities that get there, and it's their biggest first hurdle. Because, and it doesn't mean that they're not smart enough to be where they are. It just might mean adjusting to having a multiple choice test instead of being able to write an essay answer. And you have to learn a different way of studying. And it's skills that you can learn, but it can be crippling. And what I want to say is certainly the first place to look for help is at the academic success centers and different study habits. But if you are getting true test anxiety, and 1 in 5 college students gets significant test anxiety that actually is crippling, please have them go in. It's a great way to meet your doctor on campus. Have them go in and talk, because a lot of times a very simple medication that is not addictive, that is, it's an easy thing to take. It's what we give for stage fright or fear of flying. It slows your heart rate down, and it stops that whole physiologic response that ends up giving you blank brain on a test that then snowballs. So I want to just put that out there in the universe, that is something common, can be crippling, and it's treatable.
So go to your doctor, because sometimes it could take a while to talk to a therapist in the counseling center.
Right.
Start with your doctor, and then see where you need to go next.
Yes. Or I would say start with the academic success center, because, and then, if changing your stuff, or if your symptoms are just out of control. I mean, a lot of people will get to the point where they just get so anxious so they can't raise their hand in class, or they're terrified of dropping a test tube in chem lab, or, whatever. But just know that if you need help for that, yes, that is a valid reason to go to the doctor. The biggest, I guess, if I can just transition just really quickly, the biggest take home I want to say is that whether it's a sprained ankle or a sore throat or anxiety, please encourage your kid to not wait until they're at crisis levels to get help.
Right. That makes a ton of sense. This book is very helpful. The Ultimate College Student Health Handbook by Dr. Grimes. Dr. Jill Grimes is Dr. Jill. And I'm so grateful to have the chance to visit with you. Is there anything I said or communicated that you think I need to clear up, in terms of misrepresenting something, or, I'm always curious because I think feedback of just like the way someone said something, or, I'm always learning and always trying to be the best. So, um, I would
Actually,
love,
I really, and I'm not just trying to like butter you up. I think what you are doing is so invaluable because you are so approachable and so calm and non-judgmental, and those are the voices we need right now. And I think, really calling cannabis marijuana. I only learned that a year or two ago. I mean, it's this is a new thing, but
yeah, I'm always open, and I really try to be an ally and a resource to really everyone, especially the LGBTQIA plus community, and everyone. Just knowing that we all deserve to be recognized, and we deserve to live lives that are full of light, and we deserve to be, I think, elevated and appreciated, included, and to have community. So I'm excited to have this relationship with you. We'll keep doing this. We'll keep talking because as things continue to grow, I'm excited to have closer relationships. So if there's anything I can do to support what you're doing, or if there's a message you think that needs to be amplified, let me know.
thank you. I really
I'm excited. Or if there's people I'm trying to be much more collaborative, because that's really the way to help people is to work with other people to do that. How do people find you, Dr. Grimes?
So I am across social media in general as Jill Grimes, MD. And on TikTok, I am the TikTok.collegedoc.
Wonderful. And
And
also,
I'm going to move on over to YouTube as well. I just,
yeah, well, that would be great. And I know you're also on Instagram too.
yes, so it's Jill Grimes, MD. Yes.
Yeah. So you're all over the place, and you've great information. And for any parents who want to forward these tips to your kids, this is a great account to follow. And for students, ask Dr. Jill questions, because she's there and she answers
Yes.
them. And it's wonderful to have a doctor in your corner. So thank you, Dr. Jill. We'll do it again. I am so grateful, and this has been an absolute pleasure.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for all you're doing for the kids too. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.